Jack, so as David mentioned, your book, This is Ohio, The Overdose Crisis and the Front Lines of a New America, really centers Ohio and the opioid crisis, and it centers grassroots activism. But can I ask you a 2020 election question first before you tell us more about your research? I want to know what you think about the fact that in 2020, all the states that had some sort of legalization of a variety of substances on the ballot, all I think passed.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a step in the right direction. Decriminalization is, one of the things that when you talk to people who use drugs or people who are in recovery, oftentimes you hear the story that, it was jail or it's prison that helped me find my way. But I look at that as a series of failures that, in fact, like, why do we have to get someone in prison in order for them to find their way in life? So I think, what's happening around the country is that, I think this broad agreement that the drug war hasn't worked, and that it's time to try some new things.
And so in centering the grassroots activism around the opioid crisis, around mass incarceration, can you tell us some success stories and the role that Ohio plays in this national conversation?
Um, in my book, I don't, there aren't a whole lot of success stories, to be quite honest with you. And
Or success tactics, tactics, things, strategies, I guess.
yeah, I think that, like, some of the things that we're trying, is we're trying things like drug courts, we're trying things like, day reporting, things like that. There was a number of people in my book who were in those programs. But increasingly, we're finding that, they're not as successful as people would like to think that they are. That in fact they tend to disrupt people's lives in ways that make it harder for them to find their way in the world. When people talk about the drug war, people often think about, cartels and big drug busts and things like that. But what it really is, it's the day-to-day indignities that people have to go through to deal with a possession charge, or to try to get their license back, or try to get, and in other words, try to get their life back together. One of the central figures in my book had a charge, abuse of harmful intoxicants charge against him down in Pike County. And it happened to him while he was actually in treatment, and he somehow got a hold of some heroin. He overdosed. He went to the hospital, and he was charged, right? And so I kind of followed him as he tried to deal with this charge, and I went down to Waverly, to the courthouse, which is
Wow.
down in Waverly. I went down there several times with him, and every single time I went with him, the judge would say, "Well, can't meet with you today. Come back on this date." And it was basically 8 hours of his life, taken away from him as he's trying to deal with this charge. That's not dramatic. That's not a big deal, right? But that's what a lot of people, in this country have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's like rethinking that approach that gives me a lot of hope. I think that there are people who understand that. I think there are a lot of judges who get that because they're dealing with it in their courtroom all the time. And I've had judges tell me, I'm not a treatment counselor. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And yet they have to do it every day.
And that really resonates with one of the sort of key quotes or themes in your book, that every drug overdose is a policy failure, right? It's not, shouldn't fall to judges to treat it. It shouldn't fall to individual people. It's a policy failure day in and day out.
Yeah, or police officers, or we put too much. We burden people with
School
issues that are
systems.
much bigger than them. Yeah, yeah. So I was gonna say, David's thing about Ohio being able to teach people something. I think that's absolutely true. It's what I saw, when I was reporting on this story, was just just how beautiful grassroots organizing can be, and how life affirming it was for me, and it made me believe in democracy and democratic institutions again, to see people who had never thought of themselves as someone who could speak in a city council meeting, or could actually, two of the people that were in my book were on a panel discussion with Senator Brown, in Newark. And these are people who'd never done anything like that in their life. And there they were, you know, talking to Senator Brown about, you know, the way that they saw the overdose crisis in Ohio. And so that to me was, that is a lesson, I think. I think Ohio has a rich history of being actively involved in the community on a grassroots level. One of the things that just kind of blew my mind when I was doing this work is that I noticed, just sort of paying closer attention to the people who were doing the organizing. My cat just jumped on. Is that, you know, they had different opinions about politics on a national level, but on a local level, when they found something they could work on together, they could come together. And that gives me hope in this moment that we are going to be figure out ways to cross the divide.
That is for sure something I think we should all be keeping in mind. What can we do at the local level? There are so many great examples there. I wonder, Jack, one thing that really struck me about your book was the beautiful narratives and the many threads that you weave together. Could you talk a little bit about your method? I don't know if any of your writing students or Connie or David's writing students are with us, but what was your method like? How did you pick your people, or was it like a exist, or like you felt like your subjects picked you? You know, what was the impetus for the book, and how did it come together? How did you find your the key narratives you wanted to focus on?
So I have young children, 3 of them, and I can't travel very far. So I decided that I wanted to focus on the community that I live in. And you know, what's interesting about Licking County is that there's nothing really interesting about the overdose crisis here. We're pretty middle of the road in terms of numbers, in terms of you know, where we stand in the state. So that made it interesting, just because it was normal, it was typical. But then also, I started following people and learning from them. And one person sort of led me to the next person, to the next person, and I found my central characters, the people who I, you know, are now my friends, I would have to say. Um, I actually really wanted to cut a lot of voices out of the book and streamline it, but my editor argued against it. And then which, you know, it's actually easier to do that, you know, to have fewer voices. But he said, and I think he was right. He said, you know, you want to have a chorus of voices, a chorus of people who are kind of saying the same thing. And that thing is that, you know, people's lives matter, even people who we disregard and who we stigmatize, and and they were all saying that, and they were saying it in different ways. You know, one of the stories that I really love from the book, there was a group of folks in recovery who have a Wednesday night dinner, and anyone can come. And I don't think that we're like on the same page politically, me and these people, um, but uh, but they open their doors to anyone, and in whatever shape they're in. And it's close to the woods. There's a lot of people who are unhoused who show up. There are a lot of people who use drugs who show up, and they treat them as they are, and they meet them where they're at. And they love them, and they support them, and they feed them, and I find that to me, that was sort of the sentiment of all the people that I was following in the book. And it gave me hope. I think it's a hopeful book. The reason I called it "This Is Ohio" was because I got so sick and tired of seeing how Ohio was portrayed in the national media around the overdose crisis. I mean, the numbers are staggering. And in May, we had over 540 people died of an unintentional overdose in our state. Um, and that's the most of any month in the history of our state.
Wow.
And we should be we should be angry. And what I kept seeing in the national media, though, was that this was a state full of people who were sort of on their knees and not addressing this. And that's not what I was seeing on the ground at all. And so the title "This Is Ohio" is sort of a reply to that. No, this is Ohio. This is Ohio. This is the Ohio that I see. Um, and I still see it. I'm still working. I'm still reporting. I'm still following these amazing heroes who are out there doing the work and showing up.
can you catch us, can you write the epilogue for us now? Can you catch us up to speed on some of the things that have happened since
So
your book came out?
yes, so actually, I actually got a couple of paragraphs in March, like towards the end of March, because I wanted to include. I mean, one of the things that happened was that people in unhoused people in Licking County could not find a place to wash their hands.
Mm.
Uh, when the pandemic started, and no one could figure out a way to do this, but the grassroots community came together and figured it out, and I just thought that was pretty awesome, that they figured out how to make that happen. Um, what's happening now is that the book kind of centers around this one woman, Trish Perry, who sort of sets up shop every Saturday on a corner in Newark and has been doing it for 2 years now. And she actually managed to purchase the corner, and is now, owns the corner, and is putting up a building there eventually. Right now she's got a storage unit there, but it's a cool thing to see. What happens, I think it's the same thing, and I would say the people that I wrote about taught me something about writing, which is that you just have to keep showing up, right? It's the same thing when you're working with people who are struggling. You just have to keep showing up no matter what. And so, and that's what I did. I'm trying to keep doing that. But they show up a lot more than I can sometimes.
I've been asking everyone to kind of end with a something, for us to do. And I feel like is that yours? Just keep showing up.
Just keep showing up. Yep,
That's such
absolutely.
a powerful message.
In
And
fact, the book was dedicated to the people who keep showing up. So.